Okay, everybody, this is Emar Silvertooth, the Sports Inquirer, and thank you for joining us on this latest edition of the Fighting Peaches as we look at the opening of training camp for Georgia State men's basketball. We're recording this on October 7th, 2021. As always, to follow everything that we do, head to the mothership to sportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. I know this is a segment on Georgia State basketball, but if you head to the site now, you will see a lot of content on the other Georgia State sports taking place, such as volleyball and soccer, and we have different sports like that. We have exclusive interviews with Sally Bohemus, the head coach of Georgia State volleyball. We also have spoken several times so far this year with Brett Surtsey, the head coach of the men's soccer team, Ed Joyce, the head coach of the women's soccer team, and we have interviews with players and things of that like. So make sure you go to the site to check all of that out. You can also go to our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Sports Inquirer. Every time we do a post of any new content, it goes right to our site. So make sure you go to our it goes to our social media platforms. So make sure you follow that so that whenever we do a new post, you'll get an update of when it happens. Finally, go to our audio and video hosts such as YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and others. Wherever you get your videos and audio, just go to there. You will find us, and that'll be a great way to keep track of all that is going on. All right, so Georgia State men's basketball, they opened up training camp earlier this week, and they are now ready to go. They're coming off of a third straight appearance in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. And they said they opened up practice earlier on this week. Here is head coach Rob Lanier on the opening of practice and a return to normality.
I think this season is the norm. Over my 32 years, what we're going into now is what I'm used to. Last year is what required the adjustments, you know. And because of last year, I still have to go into the season with the anticipation that there can be some surprises or some abnormalities in the calendar, that there could be a cancellation or forfeiture of games, that those things um, were so common last year throughout the country, but in particular, we had a lot of those experiences that with COVID, with vaccinated players versus unvaccinated players, there's a lot of things that have become sort of the new normal. So we've had to adjust to the fact that there'll be some hiccups along the way. But playing a 31 game or 30 game regular season in a conference tournament and postseason, those things have been the norm over the course of my career. So there's not a lot of adjustment from that, and we have a lot of experienced players. Last year was sort of not an aberration. It was something everybody was dealing with, but that was where the adjustment was needed. But it's given us a frame of reference where it may be more normal this year, but it might not be completely normal. And because of that, I think we're all kind of still in that mode that there'll be a lot of coaches still not wearing suits, myself included. So there is a little bit of a new normal there that we experience that will have some carryover, but I think it'll be back to what more like we've been used to.
So even last year, we all know with the pandemic, things were a little bit different, but Georgia State was still able to manage to put together a record of 16-6. And as I mentioned, they were in the championship game of the Sun Belt Conference for the third consecutive year. Unfortunately for Georgia State's sake, they did not win that contest and fell short of making the NCAA tournament for a third consecutive year. The Panthers fell to Appalachian State in that championship game. Here is Lanier on if there is a hangover from that loss and the team looking to rebound from that defeat.
No. Um, uh, I've probably talked about it a little too much myself. You know what I mean? It sticks with me in a different way, but in terms of motivation, you know, our theme after the season was that when we come back in the off season, we're starting over. And I think sometimes there's a tendency when you have a disappointing finish to a strong year that there mentally that you want to skip ahead to that game you lost so that you can win it this time, right? And I think that's a fundamental mistake mentally if you don't take the approach that you are starting over. And so, like, we can't skip ahead to the next year's conference tournament and, want to win the championship and get revenge or whatever you're, um, we've had, since I've been here, had to develop some, and we talk about with this team, some metal. We've got to develop some metal. And we saw it in the preseason that when adversity would hit us, we wouldn't always respond to it in the moment in the best way. And hell, my first year, I was breaking up a fight in the timeout because not because guys didn't like one another. It was the previous year you had some alphas on the team that weren't in those huddles now, my first year. And now we're trying to establish ourselves, and you got new guys there trying to assume these roles. And when it got uncomfortable, guys were looking elsewhere for answers. And so when we were playing well, we looked pretty good. And when things weren't going our way, we didn't always handle it great. And periodically throughout the course of the last 2 years, that would rear its head. And the conference championship game was one of those games where App State was outplaying us. They were tougher. They were more engaged. We had just won 8 games in a row. And we went into the game like there was a script, and App State was going off script instead of just being engaged in the game and playing the game real time. Because we wanted an outcome instead of just playing the game. And I think fundamentally, not about the game itself, but the lesson that we have to take from that going forward is, and we talked about this today before practice, to run our own race.
So Coach Lanier is pretty straightforward about it, that the team has moved on and turned the page to another season. The benefit of that, I think that'll help out in that regard, is that 2 key players from last year's team have come back for another season. And those are super seniors Kane Williams and Corey Allen. Both of them had the option to move on with their athletic careers, but decided to return to Georgia State with that extra year of eligibility. I asked Coach Lanier directly about if his impact or how he helped Williams and Allen make that decision.
My contribution was zero. Um, I never spoke to them about it. I shouldn't say that. I had a conversation with each of them as the year was going on that I wasn't going to talk to them about it. That the decision ultimately was going to be theirs. And I didn't want them to waste any time thinking that any decision I made during the course of the year was to try to somehow manipulate what they were going to do, that I was going to support them either way. If they decided to go on, I was going to try to help them in any way I could. And if they decided to come back, I'd love to have them. But I wanted them to make the most of what we were doing last year without any thought of, and that decision was going to be solely up to them. And it's been my approach with everything, whether it's guys getting vaccinated or not vaccinated, all of that stuff. All of that stuff is an individual decision that I want these guys to make. Not going to shove anything down anybody's throat. And those guys coming back was just the same thing. And they made that decision on their own. And I think it's a credit to our staff and the people in the program and to these guys as players that they wanted to come back and have an opportunity to make another run at it. And certainly I'm happy to have those guys back.
Yeah, so Allen and Williams, 2 top scorers from the team last season, are back for another year. 2 other traditional seniors are also returning for the Panthers in Eli Sasime and Justin Roberts. So Allen, he was a second team all conference player last year, while Sasime was a third team player, a third honor, after becoming just 7th player in program history to average a double-double for the season. But Allen has been the name of buzz for the team this off season. He's transformed his body. You can see the social media pictures or even on the site for Georgia State Athletics. They did a big story about it. But here is Lanier on Allen's body transformation and the rest of that senior class.
Corey has really established himself as a leader with his actions. at that age, I don't know how old you are, Kevin, but me and you probably have more in common than we do with them. And so you and I both know how hard it is to lose 25 pounds, maybe.
Yes.
So, for Corey Allen to do that at his age, where, kids eat what they want, do what they want, and some of them genetically, you don't see it on them. And for Corey to say, I'm going to discipline myself and I'm going to change the way my body looks so that I can be better at the game, for a guy who's already scored 14 points a game for his career, for him to make that commitment is it's a great example for everybody inside the team that this guy is really serious about what he's doing. Kane has spent more time in the gym working on his game than at any other time since he's been here. And that's noticeable because he has a big role. And when you see a guy who already has the role, he's already been an all-conference player. He's already been to 2 NCAA tournaments. When you see a guy who's got that resume, decide to come back, and then follows that decision up with a greater work ethic, it has an effect on your team. And, Justin has been consistent over the course of his career. Anybody who's watched LAL play knows that he plays with his heart and with passion and emotion. So that's a really strong group of upperclassmen to be able to rely on. And so far, they've been walking the walk, and it's been good for our team. But they still have to continue to build, and those guys right next to them need to take it to another level. But I do think we're on the right track. We just got to get in better condition as a team.
Yeah, and that foursome is also being joined by returners such as Evan Johnston, Caleb Brooks, Colin Moore, Jalen Thomas, Caleb Scott, and Zach Pina. So those guys are back from last season. Also, two players who took red shirts for the 2021 campaign, Nelson Phillips and Joe Jones III, are also on back on the court this year for the Panthers. Here is Lanier on roster management. And you do have to acknowledge also that they will have five newcomers as well on the team, which brings their lineup so far, or the number of players on the roster, to 17. So here is Lanier on managing this large and experienced roster.
Sometimes when you have guys who are like third-year starters, we've got 4 guys that have been on conference team. And I think sometimes guys concede that those are the guys. So even though it might be competitive, there isn't necessarily that mentality that I'm going to come in and take your spot sort of competition, if you get what I'm saying. So you'd like some of that, but it's a catch-22 because, we've got 15 guys on scholarship. Joe Jones is out for the year, but even though Khalid Brooks is not on scholarship, he plays minutes for us. You guys know that. Even as a walk-on, I'm comfortable putting him in the game. And he's a guy that I really have a lot of trust and confidence in. So we've got 15 guys that can go out and play, and there ain't enough minutes for all 15. So there is some competitiveness in there. But with the new guys, sometimes they spend more time just trying to breathe than worrying about competing. They're trying to get through a college practice because it's a different workload. So sometimes you get young guys who, instead of coming in and thinking about it competitively, they're saying, man, they're looking at the clock saying, when is this damn practice going to be over? This is hard, and I think there'll come a time where they'll settle into the grind of a college practice, and they'll start to, the game will start to slow down. What we're doing will slow down, and you need those older guys to kind of carry the load. Now, that said, having Nelson back, he's a guy that's gunning. He's coming for some guys, and obviously we missed him last year. Colin has been out, and Colin was a guy who had a bright future, and he went through last year where we had some guys out due to the protocols and all of this stuff, and then he kind of struggled coming back, and so we're trying to get him back healthy now because he's coming off surgery. So those guys and Jordan Rawls do present some challenges, because they give us some depth in the backcourt. And Jordan is a guy who's capable of being a starter. Evan Johnson is a guy who's capable of being a starter. And he's proven that at different times throughout the course of the year. So we'll get some of that you're talking about there, Brady, but I haven't seen enough of that, to be honest with you.
And with all of those returning players, as well as newcomers and transfers coming in, and red shirts who are now back ready to play, expectations are high for the Georgia State program. Here is Coach Lanier on the team handling these expectations as they prepare for the regular season.
I think every year, ultimately you want, when you're a mid-major program, you want to get better and have a chance to win the tournament at the end and go to the dance. Like everybody wants that to be the result. For us, we don't want to just get to the dance. Like our goal is bigger than that. But you always want to become the best version of whatever you can become with this particular team. And I don't know what that looks like, but I feel good about what the capabilities are. If some things fall our way, if we're healthy and we don't have any major injuries, like I think the collection of players and the experience is good enough that we could be truly formidable. So I do think at our best, we could be really, really good and accomplish something special. And so each day, how do we become our best? And I think that's where your focus has to be. I think coaches get ridiculed sometimes for talking about one day at a time or one game at a time, but there is a sort of a mentality that each day you do have to try to get better each day. And you can't lose sight of that, especially when you have some successes. Can you put that aside and compartmentalize that stuff and keep forging ahead and trying to get better each day? And so we all know what we'd like it to look like at the end. But if you focus on that, you're not going to get there. So our focus has to be on like getting better tomorrow. And as cliche as that sounds, I don't know that there's another way to do it. I haven't heard that yet. I've heard that saying that is cliche, but I haven't really heard the alternative to doing it. Because if you don't really focus on what's in front of you, I haven't seen that other way.
So that's our preview or some information about the opening of practice for Georgia State as they prepare for the regular season. We'll continue to have content over the next week or two as leading up to the start of the regular season. We'll specifically break down the players and give some more information, especially the newcomers, because Coach Lanier did have some comments on the newcomers and what to expect from them. But thank you for listening to this edition of the Fighting Peaches. Make sure you go to thesportsinquirer.net for more information on Georgia State athletics, as well as all college action in the state of Georgia. You can also go to our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the Sports Inquirer. And then finally, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcast, iTunes, wherever you get your audio and video content. Until next time, good fight, good night, and be safe.